Picture this. It's a bitterly cold night, the wind is howling, and a massive crowd has gathered. But, they haven't gathered to listen or to learn. No, they are there for one reason, to mock. They're totally encircling the prophet Jesus, or Isa as he's known in the Islamic tradition, laughing cynically and demanding the literal impossible. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to break down one of the absolutely most fascinating narratives of miraculous creation out there. We're diving right into a moment where human arrogance collides head-on with divine intervention. And we'll see exactly how a crowd's attempt to totally humiliate a prophet ended up producing a creature that basically defied everything they knew about the natural world.
Section 1. Conditions of the Impossible Challenge. Let's really dive into this bizarre scenario. Because the crowd surrounding Isa, they didn't just want some run-of-the-mill miracle. They weren't asking for a healing or for food to miraculously appear. No, they wanted to stump him completely. They wanted to lay out a set of conditions so unbelievably contradictory that literally no living thing could possibly fit the bill. The whole point was to prove his claims of prophethood false, by forcing him to break the laws of nature in a hyper-specific way.
If you are truly a prophet, make for us a creature unlike any bird known to humans. Just listen to the pure arrogance dripping from that demand. They're throwing down this seemingly unbeatable gauntlet. One guy steps forward with an absolute smirk, kicking off the challenge. And man, as soon as he opens the floor, the rest of the crowd just excitedly chimes in, piling on more and more ridiculous constraints, trying to build an impossible biological puzzle out of thin air. And here's where it gets really interesting. They intentionally stacked all these contradictory traits to create a completely impossible riddle. One guy steps up and says, "Hey, this bird, it's got to stand upside down." Then someone else shouts out that it can only come out at night, never in the daylight. Then, from way in the back, another voice yells that it actually has to give live birth. It absolutely cannot lay eggs. And finally, the last guy, smiling like he's just checkmated the prophet, adds the final nail in the coffin. It must have skin, not feathers. I mean, think about it. To an ancient crowd, a bird that gives live birth, has 0 feathers, and hangs upside down in pitch blackness? That's an absolute biological paradox. Right after that final demand rings out into the freezing night air, this heavy, heavy silence falls over the whole gathering. You can literally feel the tension. The crowd is just waiting, entirely convinced that they've won. In their minds, they've just proved this whole thing is completely impossible. They're staring at Isa, just waiting for him to admit defeat, waiting for him to finally concede that what they're asking for simply cannot exist in the real world.
Which brings us to Section 2, molding the clay. But Isa's response? It's perfectly calm. Instead of blowing up at their mockery, instead of arguing back, or just walking away in frustration, he remains completely collected. He doesn't even say a single word to defend himself. He just quietly bends down toward the cold earth.
And here is exactly what happens next. He reaches his bare hand right into the dirt and grabs a handful of raw clay. His fingers start to move, slowly, deliberately. He's actually molding the wet earth right there, right in front of the watching crowd. Every single eye is absolutely fixated on his hands. Everyone's holding their breath. He starts forming these strange, really awkward-looking wings out of the mud. He shapes a small head, and then he carefully crafts these tiny, delicate feet that are specifically designed to hang upside down, exactly like they demanded. At this point, the shape is rough, it's lifeless, and it's totally bizarre.
Then he finishes his work. He takes this strange, lifeless clay shape in his hands, lifts it high up toward the night sky, and with this incredible, solemn gravity, he speaks one simple, powerful command over the mud. By God's will, be. And that sparks Section 3, the birth of the night bird. Because right then and there, the impossible actually happens. In the blink of an eye, the clay starts to tremble. It's literally shuddering in his hands. The mud turns directly into flesh and bone. What was just a cold lump of earth a literal second ago is suddenly alive, pulsating with this sudden, frantic energy. Black, leathery wings violently tear open. The creature launches itself right out of his hands with terrifying speed, darting erratically up into the pitch-black sky. And the absolute shock of the crowd is instantaneous. Women are screaming in terror. Grown men are stumbling over each other to back away in fear. Because they are watching a piece of mud, this utterly bizarre, featherless thing, actually take flight and vanish into the shadows right above their heads.
And the craziest part, this creature fulfilled absolutely every single impossible condition they had just asked for. It's flying rapidly above them, completely without a single feather on its body. It's navigating and moving through the pitch blackness like it's a physical part of the night itself, totally unbothered by the lack of sunlight. And finally, it flies into a nearby cave and hooks its tiny feet right onto the ceiling, hanging completely upside down. It was literally a living, breathing checklist of their impossible demands.
One guy in the crowd, just shaking, whispers into the dark, "What is this thing?" And another one replies, his voice totally trembling, "It isn't a bird, and it isn't any animal we know." Just imagine the sheer awe, and honestly the sheer fear, washing over them as they're staring up into the darkness at the silhouette of this impossible beast.
So the big reveal here, the crucial takeaway, is that they just witnessed the creation of the bat. That is exactly what they had asked for without even realizing it. The mysterious night bird that gives live birth, rocks leathery skin instead of feathers, and completely rules the darkness while hanging upside down. Every single contradictory, ridiculous demand they threw at the prophet was just perfectly embodied in this one fascinating little mammal.
And this brings us to a really profound realization that washed over the crowd that night. As they stared into the dark, it suddenly clicked. They hadn't just asked for a neat magic trick. No, they had demanded something that their own minds couldn't even fathom existing. They really thought they were being so clever by combining all these contradictory traits, but the creator's design was infinitely more vast and creative than their limited human imagination. They asked for a paradox, right? And they were handed an absolute masterpiece of nocturnal engineering.
Now, shifting gears a bit, this brings us to Section 4, the story's truth and interpretation. Let's take a step back and look at the actual source of the story. Because as captivating as this narrative is, as an explainer, we really need to separate the foundational texts from the layers of tradition that have sort of built up around them over the centuries.
So if you look at the literal text of the Quran, it explicitly states that Isa had the God-given miracle to fashion the shape of a bird from clay, breathe into it, and it would become a living bird by God's permission, right? That's the core foundational text. But all of those incredibly specific, super dramatic details, the crowd's riddle, the freezing cold night, the specific creation of the bat, the live birth, the leather wings, all of that actually comes from books of tafsir, which is scriptural exegesis, and from traditional religious folklore. These historical commentaries add this incredibly rich narrative color and dramatic context to the explicit, yet much briefer text found in the Quran itself.
Which leaves us with a really beautiful question to end our explainer today. When we look at these ancient texts and the super vibrant, highly detailed stories that surround them, we kind of have to ask ourselves, where exactly does human imagination end and a true miracle begin? Because whether you view the intricate details of the bat's creation as literal historical fact, or as this beautifully crafted traditional allegory meant to emphasize divine power, the core message remains incredibly potent. It is a true testament to the idea that the universe is just far more complex, wondrous, and totally unpredictable than our limited human minds can ever fully grasp. Thanks so much for joining me today, and hey, keep exploring.